Welcome to the Space Out Podcast, where we chill out, chat about, and space out. I'm your host, Luca, a.k.a. LucaTony, and today we're going to be stepping back from the insanely wild talk of the past few episodes to do something that I can talk about, that I have more experience with, that I can, give my own perspective and, experience. And that is my nomad lifestyle that I've lived ever since I was about 3.5 to 4 years old. Let me clarify about what I mean by nomad lifestyle. I've never lived in a single country for longer than 3.5 or 4 years, considering the very first few countries that I've lived in, which were the longest by far. And I've lived in a total of 6 countries: Argentina, where I was born, Uruguay, U.S.A, Peru, Canada, and Costa Rica. If this episode seems a little more rambly and less organized, it's because it is. I've prepared way less notes since I'm going to be speaking from experience, and I don't really need to write down facts and all of those things that I've done for the previous episodes. So I'm sorry if I jump back and forth in a couple of my stories or on the things I talk about. So the way this episode is going to be structured, I'm going to be giving you a synopsis of my life travels, basically, like where I've lived, how much time, etc., etc. Then I will be explaining and giving you a rating for each country that I've lived in, what their pros are and what their cons are, and you can start seeing a pattern of, what I value in terms of what a country has. And then I'll give you the pros and cons of having a nomad lifestyle. And finally, I'm going to give you some tips for living as a nomad, to even if you are not going to be moving on average 2 years like I do, you could still use these tips for moving to a new country, and maybe you'll find some valuable lessons that I can, give you. So first of all, let's start with the synopsis. So I was born in Argentina, and this is the point of my life where I remember the least, because I was just a small little baby. I moved to Uruguay around 2003. I would like to say I was maybe 2004. I think I was 3 when I moved to Uruguay. And then I stayed in Uruguay for about 3.5 to 4 years, again-ish. And then I moved back to Argentina for, again, 3.5 to 4 years. By the time I was 12, I was living in the United States, and this is where more I can speak in terms of personal experience and all of those things, with more factual things that I know that happened, because there's, for the Argentina periods and the Uruguay periods, there's constantly moments where I'm talking with my parents and it's no, that's not what actually happened. So I have some things that I know happened in Argentina and Uruguay, but not as much as the other countries. Anyways, in the United States, I lived in Texas, Dallas. I lived in Plano. It was I lived through my middle school years, so only 6th and 7th grade I spent in the United States. It was a nice place. Texas, everything was very big. Houses were very, very big. It's probably the biggest house I've ever lived in. What else? The schools were really cool. I'll get more into the little nitty-gritty details of each place when I rank them. But just a small overview. I enjoyed living in Texas, and I'm currently looking into going to study in Texas. So, it definitely is a place I have seen worthwhile being in, From there, I went, when I was around 14, I moved to Peru. Peru, it was probably, in terms of the place itself and the quality of the place, it was probably the worst country I've lived in. I'll get more into detail, But it's ironic because it was the worst place I lived in, but it was also the place that I had made the most friends and the most like valuable friends until just recently when I moved to Costa Rica. Now they're both like right up there. Uh, so it's like a very weird dynamic where if I want to criticize the country itself, I have to put aside the fact that I've made so many great friends because I was in the American School of Lima, so they weren't representative of the actual, you know, common person in there. They were mostly either children from, you know, people that came from other countries or stuff of that matter. Then, after 3 years of living in Peru, I moved to Canada, which I only stayed there for like a year and 3 months, which is the shortest I've ever stayed in a country. By far, actually. The second closest would be the U.S., which I've been. I was in the U.S. for 2 years and 2 months. So Canada was the shortest by far, and Canada was all right. It's funny because they say like they joke about things about how Canada is like America light, and in a lot of ways, Toronto, where I lived, was very much like Texas light for me. It was very similar in the way that people, the community there lived. It was just slightly smaller scale, right? So everything in the US was, in Texas specifically, because I know the US is very different, but in Texas specifically, everything was super big, super upscale. Houses were massive, cars were massive. Everything was like, whoa, holy shit. Like my dad had to drive to work for like 30 minutes on the highway to get there because everything was so spread out like from everything else that, you know, it was just, that's how it was in Texas. And then Toronto, Oakville specifically, was like a mini version of that, where, you know, the school was really big, the house was actually pretty big. It had a basement on top of a normal floor and a second floor, which, although sounds like an extremely large house, it wasn't as big as the house I had in Texas. The house was massive, and like it was probably cheaper on rent from what my parents told me all the way back then than living in Peru or living in Toronto. So it was just a wild experience. And my dad also had to drive for a long time to go to work to Mississauga, and like it was all just spread out apart as well, and the supermarkets were big. It was just a Texas light. But in Toronto, I also never made any lasting friends. Like in Texas, I made a friend that lasted while we talked online for about like a year and a half, and then we never talked again, which is kind of sad. I wish I could go back and keep that friendship because he was a good friend. But in Canada, I never made a friend that lasted even one day after, well, meaningfully, right? Because I actually just recently started talking again with a friend of mine from Toronto, and he sends me memes, and it's a lot of fun, but not to the level of where I speak to, I don't know, my friends from Peru or my friends from here. Now that we're in COVID, I can't see my friends from here, so it's basically just like I have left the country type of thing. So I don't know, it's a weird situation for Toronto and Canada. And then finally Costa Rica, which is, you know, pura vida and all that stuff. It's a very laid back country. It's probably the smallest scale country I've been in, maybe. But it's also it's a very me country. I'm a very relaxed, laid back type of person. So I vibe a lot with Costa Rica. And I've made tons of friends here and all of that. So let me explain now that we've brushed upon my synopsis of life travels. I've also traveled a lot for vacation because we had that opportunity. I'm forever grateful for having said opportunity. But I've also traveled a lot for you know, vacations and all of those things. And yeah, so let me tell you, basically, what my family and I did is we separated each country in 5 categories. The place itself, right? Like how, like let's say the quality of the roads, like things like that, like so the superficial stuff. Then there's school slash job, because this was all my family, right? So my dad also chipped in, and my mom also chipped in with their ratings. So we have to have an overall thing. Healthcare, because it's really important. We're a very healthy family, and being healthy is something that we drive home hard in my family. So healthcare was important. The people that are living there, that's very important. The community you're in is a crucial factor in what makes a country, in my opinion. And the climate, because, well, living in Toronto is not the same as living in Texas, I can guarantee you that. So, first of all, let's talk about Argentina. In this case, it would be a mixture of both my experiences with before moving to Uruguay, before my nomad life started, and after my nomad life started. So this one's a little more, as well as Uruguay is a little more in the gray area, like I said before, because I don't remember that many things from the early days. So in terms of the place, it's an easy 4 out of 5, because the climate there is at a very harmonious point that not a lot of other countries I've lived in managed to have for whatever reason. Like, Argentina has all of the seasons, which Costa Rica doesn't have, but I'll get onto that in a second. It has both, in summer, it's a very hot, right? Like summer's supposed to be, but it also has like a very predictable pattern of weather, where summer usually, or at least it was back all the way in 2010. I don't know now, but it seemed to be the same when I visit for Christmas vacations for family. But it usually follows the idea of it's very hot, and it keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter until it reaches a tipping point, and then it rains super hard, right? And then it cools down back to like the usual, 28 degrees, 27 degrees Celsius, because I don't work with Fahrenheit. That Fahrenheit's still, don't judge me. But it's very reliable weather. It's just that's why the climate is also a 4 for me, because 4 out of 5, because it's just good. The infrastructure in Argentina, although we have a lot of protests nowadays, and the economic situation is very unwieldy, to say the least. It's a well constructed and very pretty city. It has very colonial parts, but it kept due to the beauty of the city. But it also has a lot of very new modern areas, and we have a lot of things that other countries in South America don't have, like gluten-free and dairy-free options for, people like me, which are gluten and dairy intolerant. Like, there's just a lot of things that add up in the small scale that eventually give it that edge for me. Then in terms of school and work, that one I give it a 3 out of 5 stars, because it didn't seem that awesome. It seemed good enough, and it taught me. It taught me how to speak in English before I moved to the United States. Most schools, I think even some public schools touch English at the very least, but most schools that are private are, bilingual, and they're pretty good. So I value that very highly. So I have that as a very high point for me. Then in terms of healthcare, it's a 5 out of 5 stars for me, because we have a public and a private sector. And although it's not like, I've heard of Germany and other European countries, whenever you choose a healthcare system, you stick with that healthcare system. In Argentina, you can transition between them, and it's not over. It's the quality is incredible for the price. Like it's almost as good as the American healthcare in terms of, the quality of the doctors and the machines that you can get and the procedures and all that. But it's like a quarter, like it's like 5% of the price. Like it's probably the cheapest healthcare system that I've been in the six countries I've lived in. It's incredible how much the healthcare system in Argentina gets overlooked by other countries, but it's just out of this world. Obviously, a public healthcare that would support everyone instead of just a private hybrid would be better on the long run for everyone. But the fact that you can rely on both systems, even for just a little bit less in the public system, is incredible, at least in my opinion. And then in terms of the people, I say 3 out of 5 because there's the typical Argentinian, just like me, has a very interesting dynamic where we're extremely down to the point, like straight to the point, and we don't really mumble and like go around things, we don't try to sugarcoat things, which can be both a good thing and a bad thing. I take it as a good thing because most of the time, because it just gets the points across way quicker and way more efficiently that some other countries, like we'll talk later, like Peru, it's just awful, and the people are usually very respectful. Like there's obviously your assholes, that never changes, everywhere has assholes, but most people are very respectful in Argentina. But sometimes the type of, that abrupt and, incredibly like down to the point way of talking we have can seem very harsh to other people. So I can see why. And sometimes it even seems harsh to me being Argentinian at all. So I can see why, it might be, somewhat weird situation. Then Uruguay, I'm just going to say as a general ranking, I ranked it at an average of 3. I won't go down to specifics in Uruguay because I don't remember that much from it. But the highlights were that it's just like a light version of Argentina. Like Canada is a light version of the U.S. Well, Uruguay is a light version of Argentina. Like they're somewhat similar, but just there's a couple of things that I see that are not equally as good as Argentina. For me, again, all of this is my opinion. If you like Uruguay more than Argentina, then go for it. And I don't know the current Uruguayan economic situation, but I can guarantee you that it's better than the one in Argentina, so can't knock them for it. Then the U.S. Well, the U.S., I give it a 4 out of 5 stars for the place because, I give it although it's like I said, it's a very open, everything is big, right? Everything is big. And while that is good for most of the times, like having such a big house made it possible so that, we each have, like my brother and I shared a room practically the entirety of our lives up to that point. I think we didn't share rooms once or for like a year of our lives. But the fact that when I moved to the US, the houses were so big, I could have my own room, or the house is so big I can go help my mom to go pick up groceries, and we're not limited by the space that we have in the car for buying groceries. Like it was just, I don't know, it's just a big step up, and there's a lot of things that are very convenient to do in the US because, it's the US. Amazon, which isn't in a large portion of countries that are not in Europe or North America, all of those things that are just like small things that add up as for the place that are just good. In terms of school and job, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because I remember my middle school being such a phenomenal place. It was massive as well, and I discovered my passion for, it's not really a passion, but I discovered my love and my hobby for music. I wouldn't say passion because that's not what I'm gonna do as a living, but I discovered I really loved it, and I would have never done that if it wasn't for the fact that the middle school I went to gave me an incredible education both in the arts and in just the normal like math, English, and all of those things. It was just a very nice educational system. Then healthcare is a 4 out of 5 because although it's probably the best one, bar none in terms of quality, it's also the most expensive, bar none. So it's a mixed bag for me. Then in terms of the people, I give it a 4 out of 5 because although there's some, the American public is open to new cultures and all of those things, there were moments of, I guess, like, the usual American is very formal. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a South American thing where we're a lot more relaxed and chill. So, like, there's things that seem a lot more formal and a lot more like, that's completely unnecessary. You don't have to do that. It's fine, bro. Type of thing. And then in terms of climate, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because although it was a very hot, Texas is very, very hot, due to everything being so large scale, everything had aircon. So it was never an issue. So yeah, it was all right. Then Peru. Oh boy, this is by far the worst one in terms of ranking. So in terms of the place, I give it a 0 out of 5 because Peru, there's so many things I can say about Peru. I don't want to like ramble for too long. I've already rambled for 22 minutes and we still haven't gotten to the Nomad Lifestyle thing. But Peru is a 0 out of 5 because the sole reason that only 2 or 3 out of the 12 months of the year you can see the sun. Like, I'm not joking when I say this. There's the 9 out of 12 months of the year is just a constant cloud over the city. I lived in Lima, and it was just so demoralizing. And it's not even like it rained, because it didn't even rain. It was just gray, and it was full of dust because Lima is in a desert, and it's a humid desert. It's just not. No, the place is just bad. It's just a bad place. In terms of education, I give it a 3 out of 5, mostly because, well, I don't know I felt very conflicted about the score for the education because my education was good, it was all right, but it was the American school of Lima, and I know for a fact that many other schools in Lima are not even near the level that, the American school of Lima is, and it also had a lot of, issues since many schools in Lima. Okay, so let me explain something. Lima has this issue where if you're not in the top 0.1% of the population in terms of economic like value, you're just like incredibly way worse than everywhere else. Like, the difference between the poor and the rich is incredible, and there's just the middle class is non-existent in that country. Like, the American School of Lima was mostly paid due to my dad's job, which gave us the stability in order to do so, but the school was extremely expensive. So there was a lot of people in that school that, where the stereotypical rich kid attitude where it's just like, yes, I have money, type of thing. So it often felt, I don't know, not great. That's all I'm gonna say. In terms of healthcare, it's a 2 because, it's, I don't know, what can I say? It's just, it's not, it's good. Like, it's as if I gave it a 4 out of 10, which 5 is mediocre, so 4 is like, it's okay. Like, you won't die, so like you will get attention if you need to. So so the people, I wrote down 1 out of 5 mostly because of the great friends I've met. But if I had to say the pure, like I said before, purely the Peruvians, that it was filled with people that either treated you like garbage or just didn't want to talk to you and I don't know, it was just not great. I value the Peruvian friends that I do have are amazing people, and like the purely Peruvian friends I do have, they're amazing people, and they're not at all what they don't represent the status quo of the normal Peruvian person. So yeah. And in terms of climate, it's 0. I already talked about it. The gray everything for 9 months is awful. Then Canada, the place is a 4 out of 5 because, well, it's Texas light, right? So everything I said for Texas applies. Same for education, 4 out of 5. In terms of healthcare, I pretty much everyone in my family gave it a 0 out of 5 because they have this thing where it is a public only health system, which at first glance is not bad. But the problem is that it's so oversaturated that my mom needed to get a surgery for, like, she was going half deaf on one of her ears. She needed to get a surgery, and she just needed to get the checkup to approve to see if she needed a surgery, and they gave her 9 months. They told her to wait 9 months to get that checkup. It was extremely, like, what the fuck? She could be deaf. If she has like a tumor in her ear, she could be in severe health risk. You know, like, I don't know how to express it, but the fact that you have to wait for 9 months for something like that, or things like that, it's just not a good system in my opinion. You can say that yes, it provides everyone the same quality of healthcare. That's a good thing. But the fact that the quality of healthcare everyone gets is garbage, in my opinion, that's not a good thing. Then in terms of the people, I say 3 out of 5 because they're very, very, very respectful people. I just, it gets to the point where they're so respectful that sometimes they wouldn't talk to me. They would just give me my distance, and whenever I try to talk to them, they would be like, "Oh yes, you're surely busy or something. I need to go do something else." Maybe it's because I'm just that unlikable or something, but I've never had that issue anywhere else, and it rubbed me the wrong way. And well, like I said before while I was talking, giving a synopsis, Canada was the only place I never made actual friends that lasted that much outside of, maybe a conversation or two online or in a classroom. So in terms of climate, 4 out of 5 because I like snow. I enjoyed snow. It was the first time seeing snow, and I ended up loving snowboarding, so I ended up liking it. It was a nice mix up from the previous stuff. And finally, Costa Rica. So far, in terms of the place, I say it's a solid 4 out of 5 because although the infrastructure is not great, like, it's a very small country. The fact that it's a very small country means that you probably know a lot of people in a lot of places, and like it feels like a very tight knit community almost in a sense, and it's just a nice place. It's very green. It's very open. You can see the blue sky every day, which is something that after living in Peru, after living in Canada, which has snow and clouds a good chunk of the time as well, you appreciate it a lot more. In terms of education, I would probably say middle of the road, probably like 3 out of 5, because I haven't had some stellar teachers in my British school, but I've also had some less than great teachers, so I guess it's a middle of the road. In terms of healthcare, this is the only country that I probably never had a very extensive run with the healthcare system. I've had multiple other instances where in other countries where I've had to do something healthcare related, like my mom's thing in Canada, my gluten-free situation that just spurred in Peru, so I had to go do a checkup. The U.S.A. is just like, it was reliable, so we did a good amount of things there, those types of things. And I haven't had that much of a run-in with the health system here, so I couldn't really tell you. It seems pretty good, and Although the only thing I will say is right now during COVID, we're running really low on, beds for uh, patients in critical condition, which it makes sense due to the small size of the country as a whole. But it kind of sucks. We can only hope it gets better, I guess. And in terms of the climate, probably like a 4 out of 5 because, I'm maybe a 4.5 out of 5 because the climate here is so great. It's always a mild, like 28 degrees. It's never hot, but it's never cold. It's always pleasant. Enough to get in the pool, enough to go to the beach, and all of those things, but it's never like hot. And if you are a type of person that likes to stay in rain inside because of the rain, well, you're in luck because Costa Rica doesn't have seasons. There's no autumn or spring. It only has a hot season and a rainy season. And for 6 months of the year, it doesn't rain practically at all. Maybe like once a week, once every 2 weeks. And during the other half, it rains every day, like on the dot at like 4 p.m. So, you have a variety, but not as much as, a normal place. That's why I gave it a 4.5 because autumn is such a pretty season that losing on it is kind of, sad. Now, let me, with all of that out of the way, with 31 minutes into this podcast, let's finally get to the nomad lifestyle. So, what are the pros of a nomad lifestyle? So, there's 3 main pros I see. There's 1, the chance to start fresh. 2, the invaluable life experience and open-mindedness you get. And 3, the chance to meet so many new and different kinds of people, finding some amazing friends along the way. So, first, the chance to start fresh. This is a weird concept. I have to explain it to a lot of people that ask me how the nomad lifestyle is. It's a cool idea where if you didn't enjoy your past experiences and you didn't enjoy what you did in the past country, let's say in Texas I didn't do anything, right? Let's say wasn't in a team, I wasn't in whatever, I was a very introverted kid, whatever. You have a chance when moving to another place to choose your own character, almost like, creating your own character in an RPG where it's just like, okay, I feel like if I could, if I wanted to, I could just become an extroverted asshat if I wanted to, right? Because that's the image the people in here see me as. And if I don't want to, if I want to be an introverted bookworm and focus on my studies, then you can. And you don't have any baggage from people from before. You can completely restart who you are, which is incredibly liberating for some things, like some past weight of not knowing what to do, things of that nature. Like, you have a chance to start new, and it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. The second thing, the invaluable life experience and open-mindedness. So, in terms of this, it's just like one of those, and this is the most stereotypical out of all of them, as maybe aside from the last one, but being able to see so many different cultures, interacting with so many different people from so many different backgrounds. Like, if I had to count the amount of people from the different countries that I've seen, like if I could separate every single one from different countries, you probably couldn't put them in a room. Like, I've interacted with so many people from so many different ethnic backgrounds that I've gained so much different perspectives in life that I would have not had if I just lived in Argentina my whole life or stuff like that. It's just something that I can't really describe. I would have to make a whole ass podcast episode just on the experiences I've gathered, because it's just so invaluable and so extensive that I just can't describe it. And finally, the chance to meet so many new and different kinds of people. So, like I just said, it's just a very wide variety of people that you get to meet from very different places, and you get to meet so many different people that you change along the way. I'm Argentinian, but I've gathered small little itty bitty things from every place. Like there's a lot of people that say that they don't notice that I'm Argentinian because I don't have an accent, right? But that's because I lived in the U.S. for so long. I know just a little bit of French because I lived in Canada. I know the slang from Costa Rica and Peru and Uruguay, like, and sometimes I confuse words from like Uruguayan Spanish and Argentinian Spanish because they're so similar, but they're slightly different. Like, there's those things where it makes you such a different person because of the different type of people you meet, and you get to interact with some of the wildest characters and people you've ever seen. And then the two cons I see from this type of lifestyle is, one, losing friends along the way due to not being able to see them face to face, and two, a feeling of never having enough time to be in a relationship or doing something memorable. So for the first one, the second one's more philosophical than the first one, but the first one is pretty plain and simple. There are some people that don't relate to other people in the same way when they have to interact solely online through text messages or through video calls or the things of that matter. So there's definitely friendships I've lost along the way that, because, you know, we used to, I don't know, hang out at lunch every day and that's the only time we see each other, I just haven't talked to that person since, and I've lost that friend due to time. And then the second one is, well, it's a feeling of never having enough time. So it happened a lot earlier on. Like I gave it up while I was here in Costa Rica, and I said fuck it, and I got in a relationship. But basically, I felt like I never had enough time to do anything because, I don't know, like for example in Peru, I lived there for 3 years, which was the longest aside from the very first few, Argentina and Uruguay. It didn't feel like I had enough time to, I don't know, be memorable for certain things. Like I didn't get an award for being an exemplary student because I wasn't there for all of middle school. And I didn't get an exemplary award for high school because I didn't finish high school there. So there's a lot of things that, like, you don't get the ability to do because you move on so fast. But that's something you eventually come to accept and you live with, and you say fuck it, you know, just go with it. You live your life like it's the last minute because you never know what's going to happen. So yeah. So finally, to wrap up this extremely long episode, it went on for so long, we're going to touch on the tips for living as a nomad, or just for traveling and living in a different country altogether. So first, don't be afraid to slow down at first. I know there's people, me included sometimes, I'm tempted to do everything when I get to a new place. Like, oh, let's go, like here in Costa Rica, oh, let's go visit the waterfalls, you know, those so pretty ones that we heard all about. Oh, let's go to the beach and learn how to surf, you know, those type of things. But meeting new people, remembering all the new information about the place you are in, like where the supermarket is, where your job or your school is, what time you have to wake up to go to said job or school, all of those things, it can get pretty exhausting at first. You have more than just, you know, next week to know the place you're living in. You don't have to rush everything to, you know, experience it all. You don't have to, let's say if you go live to Rome, you don't have to visit the Colosseum first thing, you know? Is that where? Yeah, Rome has a Colosseum. I'm a dumbass. But yeah, you don't have to visit the Colosseum the first week you're there. You can go after. It's no biggie. Then the second tip is you have to realize that you aren't in a perpetual state of vacation, which kind of goes in hand with the first tip. But it can be tricky to distinguish between living somewhere and being in a vacation spot sometimes, especially if you didn't follow my first tip. But if you don't see it as a place you're passing through, you have to, like, don't see it as a place you're passing through. That's what I meant to say. See it as a place you can make powerful connections and memories. Because at the end of the day, whether it's 1 year or 4 years, the people you meet there could be extremely impactful to who you are. They could be extremely important people to you down the road. Like me meeting my best friend in Peru, and then me, out of like all of those things. If you don't do them, if you don't live in the moment, and you appreciate the fact that there's people around you that you're now coexisting with instead of just vacation people that are just like, oh yeah, random tourists. That point went on for so long I forgot what I wanted to say. But basically, don't see it as vacation. It's extremely hard to at first, but I know you can do it. Don't see it as vacation. Third, don't be afraid to stand out. Because I've seen a lot of people and a lot of comments online regarding how to fit in. And there's a lot of people that were like, oh yeah, try to adopt cultural habits of people you're with, this type of thing. Don't do that. It's a lot more important to be yourself and be your own culture, to show your own cultural background than trying to fit in faster. Because although you might fit in, quote unquote, faster by getting rid of your cultural background and, I don't know, speaking in a slightly different tone of Spanish like I would if I wanted to fit in here in Costa Rica, you would be a lot more memorable, and it would make you a lot more of an interesting person if you were stuck to your cultural background, if you know what I mean. Obviously, you can change if you like something about this new culture that you like. But, for example, I'm always known as the Argentinian guy because my Argentinian culture, even if there are other Argentinian people in the school, I've kept it so well because, speaking Spanish at home with my family, going back to Christmas vacation, but to visit family members and all that, it's so ingrained in me that I am the Argentinian guy. And it's a lot easier for people to be like, oh yeah, you're the Argentinian guy. Yeah, I know you, and you get to hang out with people that would just pass you off as, oh, just a random Joe whatever, like, because you're Argentinian in my case. So don't get rid of your cultural background. Your cultural background is as important to who you are as how you speak, as how you look, as whatever. Finally, my last tip, if you know you're moving somewhere else in the future, you also have to remember that as well. I know it kind of contradicts my second point of living it as if you're staying there and not on vacation, but you also have to keep in mind that you will leave and use it to your personal advantage. If you don't like where you are, like I didn't really enjoy my social situation in Canada, well, all is good. You will be gone soon enough. I was. After a year of being there, I left. And if you do like where you are, well, don't waste your time. Live it to its fullest. Go out with friends. Spend your time with people you care about. And most importantly, make powerful memories with them. Because those powerful memories and connections will last you a lot longer and will give you a lot more satisfaction in life than just, living passively and just being like, okay, let's just share another place, blah, 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 blah. You have to find this fine line between living in the constant of where you are now and living knowing that you will eventually leave. You have to appreciate the fact of what you have while you have it, but also not hang up on the fact that you will leave and that you will lose it. I know it's a very complicated and not a very easy thing to do. It took me about 5 countries to realize it, but if it's something I can give you, that's the most important thing after hearing this podcast, it's that. Thank you so much for listening through today's episode. If you enjoyed for the more laid-back content and attitude of today, let me know on my Twitter at Luca_Scutari, Scutari. If you enjoy my form of sort of storytelling, I would recommend you check out my Storyfire account, LucaTony. Storyfire is a website like YouTube that also lets you publish stories on the side, and I'm using it to publish my sci-fi novel Freedom Hunters. So if you enjoyed the more story chilled out episode of today, go check it out. With all of that said, thank you for spacing out.